Some games throw you into huge worlds full of characters, quests, and constant noise. You know the type, loud, chaotic. But I was just sitting and had this thought that, well, at least for me personally, sometimes I like to play games that are isolated, like you were alone. Nobody else around you, just doing your own thing in the world. That quiet feeling. Yeah, sometimes I really crave that vibe. So in this video, I want to talk about games, like the ones where the world feels empty, quiet, almost abandoned. Every sound matters, your step feels heavy, and the silence starts getting inside your head. Well, in a few of them at least. So yeah, games that make you feel completely alone. The kind of games where it feels like the whole world disappeared and you're the only one left walking through it. I gotta talk about Firewatch because this game absolutely nails that feeling of being completely alone. And it does it in this really interesting way where you're not even technically alone the whole time, but you still feel isolated as hell. And I think that's what makes it so effective, you know? So the setup is pretty straightforward. You play as this dude Henry, and right off the bat, the game really kind of strikes you with this really heavy text-based intro that's just devastating. It walks you through his relationship with his wife Julia, and you're making these dialogue choices as you go through their life together. And it gets really dark really fast because she develops early onset dementia. And the game just doesn't pull punches with this stuff. It's brutal and sad, and it sets up why Henry is out here in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming in the first place. He's running away from his life, from his responsibilities, from watching his wife deteriorate. And so you take this job as a fire lookout in the Shoshone National Forest in 1989. And I love that it's set in 89 because there's no cell phones, there's no internet, there's no modern conveniences. You are out there with a walkie-talkie and that's it. That's your connection to the world. And the person on the other end of that walkie-talkie is Delilah, who's your supervisor at another lookout tower. And she becomes your only human contact for the entire game. Now, here's what I think is so genius about Firewatch. You're talking to Delilah constantly, right? The dialogue in this game is fantastic. The banter is really natural and well written. The voice acting is incredible. And the game does such a good job of making you feel that isolation through the environment. The Shoshone is gorgeous. Campo Santo went with this really stylized art direction with these bold colors and painted textures, and it's just beautiful. It's all just good to gaze at, but it's also empty. You're hiking through these massive forests and canyons, and there's wildlife sounds and wind and birds, but there's no people. It's just you and nature and Delilah's voice crackling through your radio.
And nothing like this has ever happened before.
Maybe I'm just losing my mind.
I need you to feel safe out here.
Well, I sure don't now.
You will. I promise.
This one's a little more niche. Not a lot of people talk about this game. It definitely fits this whole games that make you feel completely alone thing because you are literally alone on a space station and everyone else is just gone. So the premise is pretty cool. It's set in the future and humanity has discovered this alien civilization on a distant planet, and these aliens are in the middle of a civil war and humanity wants to study them, but they don't want to interfere. They've got this whole Prime Directive Star Trek thing going on, right? So they send up this research station called the Espial that's in orbit around the planet, and it's got this cloaking technology so the aliens can't detect it. The crew is up there observing, gathering data, trying to understand this alien society without making contact. But then the station goes dark, communications cut out, nobody knows what happened to the three-person crew, and that's where you come in. You play as a recon specialist sent up to investigate, and right from the jump the game establishes this really unsettling atmosphere because you dock with the station and it's just empty, completely empty. Lights are still on, systems are still running, but there's nobody there. And that immediate "where the hell is everyone" feeling is super effective. The game is a first-person walking simulator / exploration game. And in short, I beat it in about 2.5, maybe 3 hours. It's one of those concentrated experiences. And the whole game is basically you wandering through this station, piecing together what happened through environmental storytelling, audio logs, emails, personal effects, all that stuff. And I know that's become kind of a tired game design trope at this point, right? Oh great, another game where I'm reading emails and listening to audio logs. But I actually think the station does a decent job with it because the station is small enough that it doesn't feel like you're hunting for a million collectibles, and the story it's telling is focused enough that the pieces actually come together in a way that makes sense. What really works about this game for the loneliness factor is just the environment itself. Space stations are inherently creepy and isolating, right? You're in this metal tube floating in the void. You're completely cut off from Earth, from humanity, from everything, and the game really leans into that. The station has this cold, sterile aesthetic, lots of white walls and clean lines and futuristic tech, but it's also got these personal touches from the crew. You see their workstations, their quarters, their personal belongings, and it makes the absence feel more pronounced. Like these people were here, they lived here, they had routines and relationships and lives, and now they're just gone. The Long Dark. I know there are a ton of survival games out there, but this one does something completely different with the genre. It's a pretty simple setup. There are no zombies, no freaky mutants, no rival factions shooting at you. It's literally just you stranded in the freezing Canadian wilderness after some massive geomagnetic disaster wipes out all the power, and the environment itself is actively trying to murder you. It really scratches that itch if you ever just get completely exhausted with the grind, look at the mess of the world, and just want to escape your current situation. Drop off the grid and go to a completely different country. Except, you know, this specific escape is incredibly lethal. The game drops you into this massive, single-player open world, and you are entirely on your own. There is a story mode called Wintermute, which has some light narrative elements and characters, but the real meat of this game, where the isolation truly hits, is the pure survival mode. You just pick a region, spawn in the freezing cold, and try to live. That's it. And dude, you have to actually think like a survivor. You are constantly managing your hunger, your thirst, your exhaustion, and most importantly, your core body temperature. The UI is pretty minimal, so you really feel it when things go wrong. When a blizzard rolls in out of nowhere and the wind is just howling and your clothes are freezing solid, you feel desperate. You're doing these arduous treks across frozen lakes, your vision is getting blurry from the cold, and you're desperately looking for just a tiny cabin or a cave to hide in. I was playing this recently and I had this moment where I was huddled around a tiny fire inside a busted up fishing hut. I was boiling snow just to have clean drinking water, counting my calories, and trying to decide if I should rip up my extra pair of socks to use as bandages or keep them for warmth. Those little micro moments, the things you discover and the mistakes you make, that is the core of the game. It is so methodical and deliberate. This is exactly the kind of game that fits this whole completely alone vibe, but in this really twisted, unique way where you're not just alone, you're being hunted by copies of yourself. And that creates this really specific type of isolation that's just unsettling as hell. So the setup is you play as this woman named N, and she wakes up on this spaceship after being in cryosleep for like a century. She's got this AI companion named London, who's basically just a voice. He's like a little orb she carries around. And they're traveling to this place called the Palace. And the intro is pretty slow and atmospheric. You're just walking through this massive, ancient spaceship, and it establishes right away that N is on this deeply personal mission. She's carrying someone with her, someone who died, and she's searching for a way to bring them back. Heavy stuff. And then you get to the Palace, and oh my god, the scale of this place. The Palace is this absolutely massive, impossibly huge structure that's like ancient and ornate and beautiful, but also completely alien and empty. It's got these endless marble halls and gilded decorations, and these grand staircases and ornate rooms that just go on forever. The art direction is gorgeous. Everything has this Baroque, classical European palace aesthetic, but it's mixed with sci-fi elements, and it's all glowing and surreal. It looks like Versailles meets some alien megastructure, and the sense of scale is just overwhelming. And at first, you're completely alone. It's just you and London's voice walking through this empty, echoing palace. And that isolation is immediately apparent because the palace is so huge and so empty, and you're just this tiny person wandering through it. Every footstep echoes, every room you enter is vacant, and you're trying to figure out what this place is and how to navigate it. But then, the palace activates, and this is where the game's central mechanic kicks in, and it's so clever and creepy. The palace starts creating producing these echoes, perfect copies of N that look exactly like her, move like her, and hunt her. And here's the genius part. The echoes learn from everything you do. The game is divided into these cycles. There's a blackout period where the lights go out and the echoes freeze and stop learning. And then the lights come back on and they reset with all the knowledge they accumulated from watching you in the previous cycle. And this is where the loneliness gets really twisted and psychological. You're not just alone, you're being hunted by yourself. Everywhere you look, there are these copies of you, moving like you, learning from you, trying to kill you. And it messes with your head because they're not monsters, they're not aliens, they're you. You recognize your own movements in them, your own behaviors, and it's deeply unsettling.
Oh, many different things. There's another one coming. Whoa, nice.
Cry of Fear is a crazy one for this list because this game lives in that perfect spot where loneliness becomes anxiety, dread, and just pure isolation in every sense of the word. If Firewatch is the lonely, introspective kind of isolation, Cry of Fear is the holy shit, I'm all alone in a nightmare kind. And yeah, I'm talking full-on psychological horror with messed up streets and no one around. So the game starts off with Simon, the protagonist, waking up in an alleyway in the middle of what seems to be Stockholm. At first, it looks normal enough. There's trash on the streets, broken windows, that sort of grungy late 90s urban vibe. But the second you try to move around, you realize this is not a normal city. The streets are empty, shops are locked, streetlights flicker, the fog rolls in, and the lighting alone is enough to make you tense. You're walking through alleyways that twist in ways that feel almost wrong, and every shadow seems alive. And that's intentional. The game constantly plays with your perception of space. You're always a little off balance because the city doesn't behave like it should, and you're alone, like really alone. No NPCs to talk to, no friendly passerby, just Simon against the environment. The gameplay is a mix of survival horror and psychological horror first-person mechanics. You're scavenging for health packs, ammo, and keys. You're constantly checking every corner because you never know when something's gonna pop out at you. And honestly, that scarcity of resources adds to the loneliness. Every step you take, every little sound in the environment feels like it could be your last. The game really makes you work to survive, which reinforces this feeling that you're completely on your own. There's no sense of safety ever. And then you get to the enemies, which are basically physical manifestations of Simon's inner fears. They're grotesque, they're sudden, and they often appear out of nowhere. The first time one lunges at you from a corner, it's terrifying. And because you're alone in these tight hallways or desolate streets, there's no one to call for help, no backup, no reassurance. You either fight or run. And the limited ammo, limited health, and limited save points mean you have to be careful. Every decision matters, and that really cements the feeling that you're isolated. It's not just empty streets. It's the weight of knowing every mistake could be fatal when no one else is there to catch you. Shadow of the Colossus is like one of the all-time classics when it comes to games that make you feel completely alone. And it's kind of insane, because this game came out in 2005 on the PS2, and it's been remade and remastered multiple times, and it still holds up as one of the most emotionally powerful, atmospheric, lonely experiences in gaming. And I think everyone should play this game at least once, because it's special, you know? So the setup is beautifully simple. You play as this young man named Wander, and you ride into this forbidden land on your horse, Agro, with the body of a girl named Mono, who's been sacrificed or killed or cursed. The game doesn't spell it all out immediately, and Wander brings her to this ancient temple in the middle of this vast, empty wilderness, because there's supposedly this entity there that can bring her back to life. And you meet this disembodied voice called Dorman, who tells you, yeah, I can resurrect her, but here's the deal. There are these 16 massive creatures called Colossus colossi scattered throughout this land, and you need to hunt them down and kill all of them. Do that and I'll bring her back. And that's it. That's the whole game. No towns, no NPCs, no side quests, no shops, no traditional dungeons. It's just you, your horse, this massive forbidden land, and 16 colossi that you need to find and destroy. And the loneliness is immediate and overwhelming because this world is empty, completely empty. It's this beautiful, haunting landscape with ruins and forests and deserts and lakes and mountains, and there's nothing alive in it except you, aggro, and the colossi. No enemies, no wildlife, no people, just nature and these ancient structures and an oppressive silence. And I love that the game commits so hard to this emptiness. Like most open world games, even back in 2005, they fill the space with stuff to do, right? Collectibles, enemies, NPCs, activities. But Shadow of the Colossus just gives you this vast, lonely world and says, here, explore it, ride through it, feel how empty it is. And the game uses that emptiness to create this incredible atmosphere of isolation and melancholy that few games have ever matched. Your only companion is Aggro, your horse, and I gotta talk about Aggro because this is one of the best companion characters in gaming, despite being a horse that can't talk. The relationship between Wander and Aggro is so simple but so effective. You ride together, you call for Aggro and the horse comes running. You pet Aggro, you rely on each other. And in this completely empty world, that bond becomes so important because it's literally the only connection you have. You're not talking to NPCs, you're not getting quests from villagers, you're not teaming up with party members. It's just you and your horse against these impossible odds. And then you find the Colossi, and oh man, the Colossi. These are some of the most incredible boss fights in gaming history. Each one is completely unique. They're these massive living architecture creatures like walking monuments or temples that have come to life. Some are humanoid, some are more beast-like, some fly, some swim, and the scale is just breathtaking. These things are enormous. I'm talking like 50, 60, 100 feet tall, and you're this tiny person trying to figure out how to even reach them, let alone defeat them. The core gameplay loop is you hold up your sword and it reflects light that points you toward the next Colossus. You ride across the landscape following that beam of light, and eventually you find one of these massive creatures. And then the puzzle begins. How do you get onto this thing? How do you climb it? Where are its weak points? Each Colossus is like this environmental puzzle combined with a platforming challenge, combined with a boss fight. You're grabbing onto their fur, climbing up their bodies while they're moving and trying to shake you off. Your stamina is draining. You're desperately looking for the glowing weak spots you need to stab with your sword. So you're alone in this world, hunting these beings that don't deserve to die, slowly corrupting yourself in the process, all for this one selfish goal of bringing back this girl. Mad Max. Open world games can sometimes feel way too crowded, like there's always an NPC screaming at you or a million icons on the map. Not this one. This game is just you, a car, and an endless dead ocean of sand. You play as Max, and right at the start of the game, everything is violently taken from you. Your iconic car is stolen, you're left for dead in the dirt, and his whole motivation is just getting out. Max is literally working his ass off just to escape this mess, man. He just wants to leave the wasteland behind and find the plains of silence. It's that raw feeling of just needing to get out of your current situation and move on to something completely new. The game is a huge open world action game, and it leans heavily into these survival RPG mechanics. Your only real companion is this weird mutated mechanic named Chum Bucket, who rides in the back of your new car, the Magnum Opus. He yaps at you, but honestly it just highlights how alone you really are. You're out there driving through the dried up seabed, scrounging for scrap metal, and fighting over a single rusty can of dog food or a few drops of water. Every time you step out of the car to explore a ruined shipwreck half buried in the dunes, you feel absolutely freaking exposed. And man, also like visually, this game is very well optimized. Obviously, you aren't going to find any dense foliage out here, it's a literal desert, but the realistic textures on the cracked earth, the rusted metal of the cars, and the lighting engine are just top tier. When a massive randomized sandstorm rolls in, the sky turns this terrifying shade of orange. Lightning is striking the dunes, and you are just desperately trying to keep your car together. It's intense. The raw gameplay loop is super satisfying. You get that heavy, visceral hand-to-hand combat and the vehicular warfare where you're firing harpoons to rip the armor off enemy cars is just crazy fun. But for me, the game's quietest moments are its best. It's when you shut off the roaring V8 engine, step out into the big nothing, and just look at the horizon. There's no music, just the wind howling over the sand. I gotta talk about Journey because this game is like the perfect example of how loneliness and companionship can coexist in this really beautiful, profound way. The setup is incredibly simple and minimalist. You are this little robed figure in a desert. That's it. No dialogue, no text tutorials, no UI explaining what's happening or where you're going. You just wake up in this vast desert and you see this mountain in the distance with a beam of light shooting up from it, and the game is basically telling you that's where you need to go. And so you start walking, and immediately the loneliness hits you. This desert is massive and empty and beautiful, and you're just this tiny little figure trudging through the sand. The art direction is absolutely gorgeous. That game company went with this really stylized, almost painterly look, with these warm colors and flowing cloth physics and sand that moves and shifts realistically. Everything has this dreamlike quality to it, and the desert feels both serene and isolating at the same time. You can run, you can jump, and pretty early on you discover these glowing symbols that give you a scarf, and the scarf is your ability to float and fly temporarily. The longer your scarf, the more you can fly, and you recharge it by touching these floating cloth creatures or these banner things scattered throughout the world. And the movement. Man, the movement in this game feels so good. Sliding down sand dunes, catching air, gliding through the environment. It's just satisfying and graceful in this way that makes the journey itself feel meditative. But here's where Journey does something really special and unique. As you're traveling through this world, you might encounter another player, not an NPC, but an actual other person playing the game at the same time. And the game doesn't tell you this up front. You just suddenly see another robed figure in the distance and you realize, oh, that's another player. And you can't talk to them. You can't type messages, you can't voice chat. The only way you can communicate is by making this musical chirping sound. That's it. And this creates this incredible dynamic where you're alone, but then suddenly you're not alone and you form this wordless bond with this stranger. You chirp at each other, you explore together, you help each other find secrets, you show each other where to go. And because you can't communicate with words, everything becomes more pure and meaningful. A simple chirp becomes hello, or over here, or thank you, or let's go together. You develop this language of movement and sound. So in this game, you play as this guy Mark. He's some kind of structural analyst or whatever, and his job is to go inspect a dam and a water tunnel. Except that's just the start, because you end up going through this entire fictional Scandinavian city called Stallberg, and the whole thing is just falling apart. Like, not in a zombie apocalypse way, but in that depressing real-world way where corrupt politicians and greedy businessmen just let everything rot because nobody gives a shit anymore. And here's the thing about the loneliness. You're completely alone. The entire game, it's just you walking through these massive industrial spaces, abandoned steel mills, underground tunnels, water treatment plants, and there's not a single other person around. Everyone's just gone. And you're documenting all this decay with your little camera, taking pictures of broken pipes and cracked concrete, like some kind of depressing Instagram account for infrastructure failure. What really gets you is the atmosphere. It's built on the Source engine, which somehow makes everything feel even more eerie and unsettling. These reviews keep talking about this forlorn feeling, and yeah, that's exactly it. It's that specific kind of Scandinavian melancholy, walking through these cold industrial spaces that used to mean something, used to employ people, used to matter, and now they're just quietly falling apart while you shine your flashlight around and Mark keeps muttering, "That's not good and someone should fix this," over and over again. The game is long too, like 30 to 36 hours long, so you're really spending time in this dying city, uncovering all these layers of corruption and conspiracy, finding documents about shady business deals that led to all this decay. There's even weird shit like glowing mushrooms and some urban legend about a creature called Mirko and hints at some underground cult, but mostly it's just you, alone, in the dark, managing your flashlight batteries because everything's so goddamn dark in the later sections. And the loneliness isn't just about being physically alone, it's about being the only person who seems to care that everything's collapsing. You're documenting all this damage, all these safety violations, and you just know nobody's gonna do anything about it. It's that crushing weight of witnessing decline and being powerless to stop it. Just one dude with a camera in a city that's given up on itself. The Invincible. This one came out in 2023 and it's based on a novel by Stanislaw Lem, who's this legendary Polish sci-fi author who wrote Solaris and a bunch of other really heavy cerebral science fiction. And The Invincible is very much in that tradition. It's slow, it's thoughtful, it's got these big existential ideas about consciousness and evolution and what it means to be alive. And it absolutely nails that feeling of being completely alone on a hostile alien planet where you're in way over your head. So the setup is you play as this astrobiologist named Yasna, and you wake up on this planet called Regis III with no memory of how you got there. Your crew is missing, your equipment is scattered, and you're trying to piece together what happened. And immediately the game establishes this sense of disorientation and isolation because you're just lying in the dirt on this alien world with no idea what's going on. And the planet itself, Regis III, it's this dusty, rocky desert planet with these weird rock formations and canyons and this oppressive reddish atmosphere. It looks alien, but in this really grounded, realistic way. Not like a fantasy alien world with glowing plants and weird creatures, but more like, yeah, this could be a real exoplanet that we might actually find someday. And the aesthetic of the game is fantastic. They went with this retro-futuristic atom punk style, like 1960s Cold War era sci-fi. So all your equipment looks like old analog technology. You've got these chunky devices with dials and switches. You're using a bulky tracker and a metal detector. You've got this old school spacesuit. Everything has that classic sci-fi feel, like it's straight out of a vintage paperback cover. And I love that because it immediately sets a tone. This isn't sleek Star Trek technology, it's clunky, utilitarian, retro future stuff that feels tangible and real. Your only companion for most of the game is this guy called Astrogator, and he's back at your ship in orbit around the planet. So you're communicating with him via radio, and he's guiding you, giving you objectives, trying to help you figure out what happened to the crew. And the voice acting here is pretty solid. The conversations between Yasna and Astrogator feel natural. They have this camaraderie and tension. Sometimes you agree with him, sometimes you push back, and the dialogue choices you make actually affect your relationship and the story.
I was counting on this meeting very much. At worst, it could have been another abandoned place, but not this.
The loneliness comes from multiple angles. There's the physical isolation. You're walking through these vast, empty landscapes, these canyons and valleys and deserts, and there's nothing alive. No animals, no plants, just rocks and dust, and this eerie silence broken only by wind and your footsteps. The planet feels dead and hostile and indifferent to your existence. Then there's the existential isolation. The story deals with these heavy concepts about what consciousness is, whether certain forms of life that aren't biological can be considered alive, what happens when humanity encounters something that challenges our fundamental understanding of life and intelligence. And grappling with these concepts while you're alone on this alien world, it creates this sense of cosmic loneliness, like you're this tiny, insignificant speck trying to understand forces that are ancient and vast and completely beyond you.
What is there to
understand. We have to destroy it.